So I've just gotten back from China and Shenzhen and Hong Kong, the kind of week and a half trip I did. This kind of coincided or was aimed to kind of go out with the kind of a course or trip the Dangerous Prototypes were running. And so that was a soldering workshop, market tour, introduction to the area, that kind of thing. I then tacked on a brief holiday before that. And all this was around a chance to visit the markets, to really take a look at the electronics markets there, which are really quite well known, something I'd been wanting to do for a while. And so I finally had a chance to take a look, and they are as good as I was expecting them to be. It's a fantastic place just to explore and wander around and buy lots of stuff. And so I'm going to take a quick look now. I'll just run through some of the bits and pieces I picked up. First of all, before I went out, I decided to get myself a new camera. So I picked up this, it's the Canon EOS M. It's one of these kind of halfway house cameras between a compact camera and a proper digital SLR. And haven't had a new camera for quite some time, and my old SLR is pretty old, and so this seems a nice compromise. And it also does decent HD video recording, so I'm going to give this a go, recording some of these videos and see what the picture and the sound quality is like. So I'm going to switch over to this new camera now and run through some of the bits and pieces I picked up. So this is most of what I've picked up. I had a few things in mind that I wanted, but basically it was just whatever looked interesting, whatever was cheap, really. That was kind of the deciding factor. The pricing was really easy. It was basically a 10-to-1 kind of exchange ratio between kind of yuan to kind of British pounds, and so 10 yuan was equivalent to £1, so 1 yuan 10p, and so it was really easy to kind of work out how much everything cost. It was just a case of kind of a decimal place between the last two digits and you had your price, and so it was really kind of useful. And so I think that the main thing on my list was just a hot air rework station. They're pretty cheap in the UK. I think from Amazon they're about £30 to £40, but this I was able to pick up for £15, £16, so I was pretty happy. When I got back to the apartment, it didn't work. It came up with an error 5 message, which thankfully a little bit of Googling revealed there was a loose connection, so dismantled, put it back together again, and it's functioning again. And that's it's cheap yet fairly decent. One of the other things I wanted to try and pick up were switches. And switches can always be quite difficult with a project. I try and keep a few different types around, and so it was just trying to get a wide selection, different parts, different pieces, so different colours, different shapes, pretty much all momentary. So if you're making a project, we need a kind of panel switch in there to do something. I've got a variety to choose from, kind of reds and greens, different kind of depths, a few just lever switches for kind of limit ranges on linear motion stuff at the moment, and the odd larger, more interesting button. And so that's quite a wide range there. They had a lot of these style buttons, if that's going to focus in there. And it's basically kind of really nice, high quality illuminated panel switches. And it was a bit of a concern about getting carried away with these, so I think I ended up just limiting it to sort of one type, really. So there were those bits there. There were an awful lot of LEDs, and they came in various different kind of types and sizes. These are typically, or seem to be used for sign manufacture. So these would go behind signs, and so they're kind of quite simple, straightforward. Usually a couple of LEDs mounted in a frame of some kind. These are RGB ones. But also these parts here, these are 4 in a grid and blocks. So if you're manufacturing a sign, you just kind of screw these to the panel, screw these behind the plastic frame, and they kind of all seem to run off 12 volts. And so I picked up a variety of those. I'll power some of these up in a minute, because they're quite interesting. Also on top of that, in terms of prices, these came in at around about 10 pence a unit, typically sold in strips of 20. And I think bought 40 or 50 of these. That's £4 or £5 for all of that. The RGB ones are only a couple of pence more expensive per unit. I spotted these controllers. These were, I was going to go and focus in. They were 50 pence each, these. Or kind of varied, I think, actually, depending on when I purchased them. And it's just got 3 buttons on it. They're just kind of light sequencing units. You put in the power lines, it'll work with any of these, and it does various different kind of light modes. And there's a remote control equivalent one as well. And that, I think, was less than £2, something like that. And so it's you spot this stuff, and you've got to think of a reason why shouldn't I buy it when it's that price. It's a bit silly, but it's just the way it is. At least I found. So there's those. I picked up 2 reels of LEDs. One of them's a 5-metre reel of the NeoPixel style LEDs. And I think it's 5-metre reel. I think it was a slightly higher density one than I'd used previously. And I believe that was about £25. So I can't remember the retail price at the moment or what they'd normally go for, but it's significantly cheaper. I also picked up a standard 5-metre reel of just white single colour LEDs, and that was basically £1 a metre, and so it's £5 for the 5-metre reel. I think the final thing on the LED front were these. These were really kind of interesting little discs. It was 10 pence per watt, and I think they were 16 watts, these discs, and so they're £1.60, and these were, I think, 40 pence. And these go in light fittings. They'll kind of sit into kind of plastic moulded light fittings. You've got 2 kind of mains power inputs here, which are then kind of, there would have been sprung contacts within the frame, and so it's just a really bright white room light, and it was, just baskets of them. I just picked up a couple of 2 different sizes, and they were incredibly cheap, so I'm going to try and carefully power these up with mains electricity and see what they're like. So I wanted to kind of basically light, illuminate an area of space. They could be quite useful. So the final thing I purchased on the LED front were these 7-segment displays. I started off with a small kind of board here. I think there was a serial interface, and could be useful. And I spotted these big digits here, and so I'd had an idea and something back in my head for a little while to make a kind of like a jumbo clock or a timer or some kind of useful thing that might come in at some point. So I think I spotted these. I think they were between £1 or £2 each. I can't remember, but I wouldn't have paid more than that. And so I got 4 of those. But then, when I was purchasing these LEDs, they also had these shaped ones as well. And I kind of got thinking, one of these on their own is kind of like a segment in a 7-segment display. So I bought enough to make a 4-digit 7-segment display using these as segments. I was going to go for a red clock, or red display, but when they kind of demoed it, it wasn't as bright as I was hoping for, so I've gone for RGB, so I could turn on all the colours and have kind of brighter white if I wanted to. And so at some point, when I've got some time, I'm going to make a large 4-digit, actually maybe 5, as I've got the right number, kind of display clock timer thing. Not quite sure what it'd be useful for, but it could be a fun little project. A big part of the Shenzhen electronics markets are cell phones, mobile phone repair, mobile phone accessories, anything and everything you can think of to do with mobile phones. And obviously USB cables and chargers were one of those. And I discovered last couple of weeks, all of my kind of micro USB cables had disappeared, so I picked up a few. And the common kind of prevailing standard at the moment there seem to be these flat flex ones. I'd got one before with a kit, but they are everywhere. So I picked up a couple of these. They're They vary in price depending on where you pick them up, from 50 pence to £1, and obviously a couple of the traditional looking cables. And there's also a quite popular cables with kind of built-in lights. Actually, in the cable themselves are glowing cables, and so a handful of those. I'm sceptical about the data performance of some of these. I have had one device which has refused to work with this cable so far, and so they may only be suitable for charging. I also picked up some chargers themselves, and it's always a risky business, certainly from what I've seen, getting a charger, certainly a cheap charger from China, but at 50 pence each, pretty much all these, it was hard to not even just to experiment with. These dual port ones were quite nice. They're listed as having kind of a 1 amp output and a 2.1 amp output. I think that's probably for an iPad kind of power output and regular phone. And kind of standard 2-pin connection for the area. It works fine, but I'm going to dismantle. I bought 2 of them so I can dismantle one and see how dangerous it is to use. The kind of clearance and creepage distance between the kind of low voltage and high voltage sides it can be pretty scary with some of these parts. And so before I really kind of carry on using any of these, at least these 2, I will take a look inside one of them. I'll do that at a later date. I also picked up one UK plug style one. I think it's just a clone of an Apple adapter. Again, it's probably just as dangerous. If it's easy to pop open, I will give that a go. And just on the plug front, there was in Shenzhen, a lot of the sockets are these really kind of awesome multi-style connections. From what I understand, these can accommodate anything. So, standard UK plug will quite happily go in. 2-pin style, I think that's an American style or some kind of semi-universal style. That fits in. And I think, again, at these, I'm not sure, this is their kind of fairly standard kind of China plug. And that fits in as well. Kind of accommodates it all, and there's also room for circular pins or for kind of 3-pin European things, and that really fantastic kind of socket. I picked up a kind of a cheap extension cord for £2, and that was pretty nasty build quality. I left that behind, but I'm hoping this will be a little bit better and it'll be useful just to have on the workbench. Okay, so stepper motors, they were my kind of other big aim for this trip, and they weren't as cheap as I was expecting. The stepper motors, I guess bearings, linear bearings and all that kind of stuff, something I didn't find much of. It was mainly electronics. There are maybe half a dozen stores I came across selling this kind of thing, and a lot of those were unmanned, and it was quite difficult to find. So I found one decent place which sold a lot of stepper motors, and I kind of went with them. These kind of NEMA 17 stepper motors, they were £5.50 a piece, and kind of 1.8 degree, 0.7 amps, kind of 2-phase, fairly standard things. 0.7 amps I think is a little lower than I'd have liked, but I think at 0.7, at 550 it was worth getting, and I picked up 5, which is, to be honest, was heavy enough bringing all this stuff back. But the other thing I did spot, they had a kind of a pretty decent variety of motors with kind of proper kind of shafts on. Bit. And so I kind of came back the next day. I had thought about this, and I decided to kind of get a pair of these. And it's pretty hard to pick up, to be honest, elsewhere, at least certainly from what I've seen. The odd time when I've seen one of these for sale around or on online stores, the length of the shaft is quite limited or performance isn't great. Whereas this, I found a nice kind of match for what I wanted. So 1.8 degree step angle. They're 1.5 amp motors. They've got, I think it's 30 to 40 centimetre shaft, and these are anti-backlash threaded kind of nuts on them. And for my kind of laser engraver or any kind of project like that, these would be amazing. So I'm going to look at potentially kind of replacing everything with 2 of these down each length. I think if that works, I mean, that would be brilliant. These did come in at, I think it was £25 a piece. I think it's £25 at least. It sounds expensive now, but I think it's about right. I'm fairly sure what I'd seen elsewhere was more expensive, but I am pleased with this find. And so that is it on that front. I didn't bother with any bearings, anything like that. I found I can get them very, very cheap on eBay anyway, and so that was fine there. And okay, so the other bit I picked up are cables. These turned out to be pretty cheap. I think they were 50p each. These are just little kind of plug to socket cables, so panel mounting network ports or panel mounting USB sockets through to the plug on the other end. So if you're mounting an Ethernet board or something like that within an enclosure, these can finish it off really nicely. So I picked up a few of those. Plug to plug and plug to socket jumper cables, perfect just for prototyping work. And they were, again, 50p each perhaps. That seemed to be kind of the go-to for some of these things. And then these kind of JST 2, 3 and 4 pin connectors, plugs and sockets. I can't remember again the price. That I bought a good number of these in SparkFun before, but they're quite expensive there, and I'd use them up quite quickly. So I got a load of these. I think they worked out to be a couple of pence each, so I picked up 10, 20 at a time, and I then went back and got some more. And so I got a lot of those. The other few bits and pieces down here are a few kind of Hitachi character displays, mainly just because they were interesting shapes and sizes. Where are we? So slightly different, so it might be useful just as a nice little kind of status display of some kind, some little project. Again, another small screen, and also much more kind of 4-line, probably 20 character, fairly standard one. And so that, just those ones there. Again, I'd expect a couple of pounds each. I did write some of these prices down, but not a whole lot. Connectors to mount on the board, again, pretty cheap. And I got lucky and found 1 or 2 stalls selling little modules. So most of them were component parts, but some were selling completed segments. So send these over. I spent a while and bought quite a lot of stuff there. So these are the humidity sensors. I wasn't open one of these. I'd used one on a previous project. I think it's the DHT sensor. Just on little breakouts. And so I picked up a handful of those for environmental sensing type stuff. PIR sensors. Again, it's nice to have a stock of these, and these were under £1 each. They did have these type really kind of mini ones as well. These were more expensive, I think about £1.50 a piece. Just got a pair of them. Then the kind of Nordic Semiconductor NRF 24L01 sensors, or kind of wireless communication modules. I've been playing around with these recently, and I wanted to get quite a few of them just for messing around with kind of sensor network type stuff. So again, they were 8 to 80p each. Those ones, I don't think that's amazingly good value, so you can buy them in like chunks of 10 on eBay, but down with there. Ethernet modules, a couple of those. They could come in handy, or they do come in handy. Some of these things are just on the last day, trying to use up the rest of the money. It's like just RFID kind of module pack thing. Haven't done anything with RFID for a while, but thought, who knows. Got 7-segment, so you've got the Hitachi display to SPI adapters. A pair of 3.3 volt voltage regulators on a breakout board. Again, useful for kind of testing and prototyping. And I think that is the end of the little modules. So obviously if you're selling lots of LEDs, you need something to power them. And so power supplies are the other kind of big thing you're kind of seeing around in a lot of places. And there were these kind of cage modules. These are the two power supplies I'd bought previously for the laser engraver, 12 volt and a 5 volt. These are decent quality units from the kind of a UK supplier. I think they range around about 20 quid a piece. And it's all right, but I was looking for something cheaper. And so I picked up a handful of 5 volt and 12 volt units. They feel, just in general look and feel, they feel lower quality. They work. I did actually use one out there to a 5 volt one for charging a battery pack and 12 volt one for playing around with some LEDs. And so they certainly function, they do their job. I've no idea what the kind of regulation is of these or what their kind of power handling is. But I initially picked up a couple of 5 volt ones on one day for £2 a piece. In comparison to 20 was quite, I was very pleased with that. And then on the next day I found another stall, a much larger one, which was selling these units. And so I picked up a pair of 5s and a pair of 12 volt ones. Where are we? And so yeah, and these were cheaper. I think they were £1 a piece, or certainly for the 5 volt ones, they were £1 a piece. Actually, just remarkable. I'd have bought suitcases full of this stuff if I could. But one interesting thing is that just the stalls you're selling from, these represent the factories that produce these modules. So the factory will ship out certain numbers to the markets to sell as samples, so people could prototype a project or test something out and sample it and then go back and order a load. And so these modules had come through, they were there without kind of power rating labels on. And so I kind of asked for a pair of these, and they were rummaging through bags to find these labels. And I'm fairly sure this label is the wrong one, because I thought I bought 5 volt 3.2 amp units. And they spent a while looking, and I think they kind of reached the point where I think it kind of got to the stage where they just couldn't find them. So they got something that was close enough. So I'd imagine if I kind of did some load testing on one of these, it wouldn't get close. And just to kind of show how new it was, at least for some of these, the kind of date stamp on here is 2014, 4th month. And this was several days ago, so it would have been a couple of days old when this kind of came out. So these power supplies, I am very, very pleased with those. For larger projects, for installs, they can come in very handy, and if they do turn out to be successful, I'm going to attempt to try and source some of these to get them shipped over, or find a seller which supplies these at a significantly reduced price. So that was another thing. I think one of the kind of getting to the end now, some of these bits. And another good one was enclosures. Very hard to kind of test and just make decisions on enclosures from a catalogue or from looking through a website. And so being able to see these in person was great. But they do take up a lot of space. So sadly, I kind of stopped at these two. And they're actually, one stall was selling these, and there were other stalls which were actually using them in production. They had LED driver circuits inside with kind of power in, power out. But these were, I think, 50 pence each, possibly a bit less. I'm sure they'll come in useful at some point. Okay, so coming to the end of the selection now. One thing I was quite pleased with getting hold of were a number of these tools, parts. We were using a few of these bits on the cell phone repair kind of part of this. Part of this trip was to learn how to reball BGA devices, and apparently this was one of the more complicated things they taught at this school, but it was quite interesting. I don't know if I'd ever use it again, but it was fun to do. And so they were using kind of these little PCB holders to hold the kind of cell phone boards in whilst they were repaired. And so we walked along the market. So there's a big building where they actually do the cell phone repairs, and then all along one side are shops and suppliers selling parts, tools, or parts which actually go into the phones. And so you walk along one place to the next and ended up buying loads of different bits and pieces. And so these were I think 30, 40, 50p each, so various different kind of prizing spatula tools, tweezers, pliers, pokers, spudgers, and bits and pieces like that. Clamps to hold it in. Solder paste, again, came out to be very, very cheap. Acetone containers, lots of stuff like that that's just really cheap. And then I picked up a few bits just for kind of utility stuff while I was there. So before I actually hooked up any of these power supplies I needed to pick up a cheap kind of pocket multimeter. Again, would have been a couple of pounds. I just wanted to make sure they're actually outputting the right voltage before I connected them to anything. I picked up a cheap 5-meter HDMI lead, took the computer to the TV in the apartment because there's no UK channels, so watch the content was on there. These displays were everywhere around the place, and after a couple of days of looking at them, I finally bought one. And these came in a variety of sizes and colours, and computer programmable, came with a mini disc, so I need to find some drive to put that in to load the software. This was the cheapest one I could find. It was £7, so they're not the cheapest things in the world, but it seemed kind of fun to play with. And on that note, there was another one here. It's a POV fan, which again is computer programmable, so you can have the fan display text and all sorts of stuff. So that was an interesting one. A QI, a wireless phone charger. I've started using one of these recently, and I think this game was under £10. I hadn't found for less than 20 or 30 elsewhere, so I was pleased to spot that. And I think that is pretty much the end of my the bits and pieces I picked up. I'm sure there'll be something else I'll come across or remember I purchased, but for now, that is that. So that's the very kind of quick tour. I'm sure this will probably be quite a long clip of the various different bits and pieces I picked up in the markets. They really are an amazing place. Language barrier was an issue at first because, unlike Hong Kong, very few people speak English. But you can kind of communicate with hand signals and gestures, and this is not ideal, but you can certainly get by. So none of this stuff's priced, so you need to inquire. The prices are already very good. You can bargain a little bit, as I kind of played around with on my first day, but I quickly realised it just isn't worth it. The prices are great for what you're paying for. Some stuff isn't going to be, but as long as you know what you're after and know what to expect, it's amazing, and it's something I really hope to get back to in a few years. I picked up business cards for a lot of these places, and so if I really do like one item, I can attempt to source it from that company, get it kind of maybe shipped over somehow, or find them selling through one of the other kind of online distributors. But it is remarkable. I'm probably going to do one or two other videos looking at some of these other bits in more detail. Certainly the LEDs and the LED controllers, because whilst it's quite a simple topic, they're quite fun to play with some of these things. So for now, I think that's the end of this overview, the Shenzhen kind of electronics kind of haul I came back with.